This is the first of our series of R&D salons. And the characteristic of these salons is that there's going to be 4 really great speakers that don't necessarily have a very visible thread amongst themselves, but you'll see they'll come together in the conversation, and we will together discuss tonight the subject of curation. And you know, it's very funny because once upon a time, when I said that I was a curator, people would look at me like, what? You know, and I was always like baffled by the fact that in the United States you can write on your passport that you're an artist and people take you seriously. In Italy that would be really funny. But now I feel that I can even write curator, even though spell checks still refuse to accept the word. Everybody else really does, and there's all sorts of curation happening. So I prepared a little presentation for you just to talk about what curators traditionally used to be. So I'm showing to you here a slide from 1939. It's trustees of the Museum of Modern Art when it was still on Fifth Avenue in front of the Demoiselles d'Avignon, and it was an exhibition that was called Art in Our Time, curated by Alfred Barr Jr., who was also the founder of the Museum of Modern Art. A scholar, an academic, a deep thinker, a visionary in his late 20s. He was quite an amazing, you know, if you think about it, the museum was founded by 3 ladies. They were tired of their husband's collection of old masters, and by a 20-something-year-old director. And here you go, you know, curators traditionally take care of things. Curating from the, you know, curare in Latin means to take care of things. So this very funny slides talking about objects are some foreign loans to the exhibition Cubism and Abstract Art in 1936 that were refused admission to the United States as work of art by customs. Customs were like, this is not art, you know. So sometimes curators take care of things, but sometimes they also are just a few steps ahead, and they try to expose to the public a viewpoint about art, about design, about science that is not yet there, but might be in the future. Their dedication to artifacts and to artists is legendary. And in some cases, curators are really trailblazers. This is a slide from the exhibition Machine Art here at MoMA in 1934. And here you can see Philip Johnson preparing the exhibition. This was the second design show at MoMA. It was not the first, because when Philip proposed machine art to the trustees of MoMA, they were not really sure that that was design. So the first show was furniture. But then he was able to finally take pieces of machinery, you know, coils, propeller blades, and so on and so forth, and put them on pedestal and reveal the beauty that was hidden in machines to a really wide audience. It looked like these beautiful Brancusi sculptures, and instead they were pieces of machinery. The same can be said about the exhibition Information by Kynaston McShine in 1970, which really explained to the world what conceptual art is. You know, so all of these exhibitions tend to be milestones. And another milestone was Italy, the New Domestic Landscape by Emilio Ambas that occupied the whole garden. It was an exhibition about Italian design, and it was installed so that the crates would be the ones that would make the exhibition travel afterwards. So it was really, Emilio is an architect and designer by training. But I also wanted to show you Emilio because he is the one that gave me a definition of curating that I really love and that I have taken as a role model, which is the curator as hunter-gatherer. This idea that especially when you deal with contemporary, it's not about just sitting and watching things go by and grasping. You really have to go and hunt and gather and then feed to your little, you know, little kitchen chickens, and etc., all of the food for thought that you have found. But it's interesting how this idea of curation of artifacts has very easily migrated into the retail area. I'm showing to you here one of the first shops in the world that I consider could be really said curated, which is the Rossana Orlandi space in Milan. It's a, you might call it a design store, but it's really a cabinet of treasures, and it's a continuous discovery. There is not the kind of distance and reverence that you might find in a museum. There is actually the possibility to touch and feel. But in a way, it really is what Rossana thinks is really wonderful. And it works that way. So the individuality of the curator that sometimes is considered to be anathema to curating is instead something that we really consider important today. A second store is 10 Corso Como in Milan, more of a fashion store, but it became the archetype for so many other stores, for instance, also Colette in Paris, which followed, actually, Tank or Socomo. And here in New York, of course, you have opening ceremony. What do these stores have in common? They're not mono-brand. They're not bi-brand or tri-brand. They're about, in the case of opening ceremony, it's a couple. In the other cases, it was a person, or Colette is also a couple. They're people making choices, and they're making choices that then are going to be sold. This idea of selling is something that is already kind of corrupting the original idea of curation. I mean, the fact curators in museums are meant to have an educational mission. It's not about selling. It's about communicating something that is going to further the world. So some people really object to the idea of curated stores, but hey, Mario Batali curated Italy and everybody was happy about it. I find it very funny when they say it's curated. It looks like a market in Italy, but from now on, I'll look at markets in a different way. I also like how the metaphor of the museum has been used by some retailers as a kind of blinding mirror. You think it's the Museum of Useful Things, but it's a retail site. So you choose your museum pieces, and then you purchase them. But Curated has very easily migrated, especially online, to all of these retail sites. You see that Target has the curated shops, Simply Curated, Fab. So the idea is that you take some people, 1 to an army of 15 people that the public can trust, and this is another key word for curating, is trust, and you offer the audience a selection that's been made by these people. And so you really move into life curated in Williamsburg, or the Curate Fashion Gallery in Auckland. Over there is the Coulter Curated Holiday Gift Guide. And so I wonder, what is Coulter Curated? I went on the website. Coulter is a woman, and she never says her first name, but she says, welcome to Coulter Curated, a curated collection of the things I love. Okay, to better introduce myself, here are 10 things about me, and I'm choosing a few. But I like how she says in number 4, I believe, as Dostoevsky did, that beauty will save the world. So it's really interesting because it's this complete exposure of one's taste that has become to signify curation. And you see here Curation Nation, which is a book that appeared a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, by Stephen Rosenbaum. Has content curation become a new creativity for the masses? And here we move from the artifacts to content, because that's what's really interesting. And one of the questions that I will ask my panelists is also about the role of technology when it comes to today's idea of curation. Content curation is a slightly different or completely different kind of field. But so let's look here at what you can curate. You can curate your identity, says Peter Thompson, from functional, social, and then you get to your identity, which is a distillation of all these different factors. And then you can also curate yourself and your look. So even mass magazines have adopted the idea of curation. You can curate your family. You can preserve and share your family treasures. There's a service for that. And there's even the art of curating worship, and this is written by a Baptist pastor, and it's about curating the way you communicate the word of God to your flock. So it really is interesting how it's migrated everywhere. You can even hire someone to curate your sex life for you. And there's social stories. I'm showing you here many websites and many apps that are about sharing ideas from a position of authority and credibility, which I find particularly interesting. Content curation world. I don't know if you were all aware of how recurrent this word has become when it used not to exist outside of these walls. And so just to sum it up, you can curate people, design, panels, conference, artists, worship, bookshelves, sex life, dinner parties, identity, experiences, even art, design, architecture, film, and the things that we used to curate here at MoMA when we were not aware of our position in the world. And one thing that is very interesting is that what many of these aspects have in common is the picking and choosing from a knowledgeable stance, and then piecing it all together so that the outcome is much more than the sum of its parts. It's almost a form of design, and it's almost a form of composition, and that's why I think that music can really provide a very strong metaphors for the way we look at curation in the future, and that's going to be the role of Tor to explain to us tonight. But curating has become so commonplace that there are even memes about curating. You know, there's thing who's going to curate the curators, of course, and then there's Pinterest, which is a meta Pinterest that curates Pinterest sites. And of course, you've all seen, I've received it 15 times. I curate children's parties, you know, the famous New Yorker cartoon. But I wanted to just end before I introduce all the speakers tonight with this pyramid that you did, right? Yeah, I know, I really liked it. So Maria one evening brought back this beautiful essay by Vannevar Bush from 1945, in which Vannevar Bush alerted, really pushed all the scientists that had worked on the war effort in World War II to actually turn their invention to good ends. But in particular, he was talking about the incredible amount of data that at that time, in 1945, the enormous amount of data that was almost impossible to really manage, and we needed some path into that incredible amount of data. Think of today, but he was already thinking of the profession of curation that way. What curators do today is they become trusted guides for us, whether it's in the arts or whether it's in news or whether it's in retail. I don't know if I can trust anybody, I trust myself. But they become trusted guides that help us navigate reality and that hopefully also stimulate our critical tools. Because ultimately, what I think is important is for curators to take responsibility and to really think that they cannot hold on to their particular skills, but they have to try and communicate them. So tonight you're going to hear from Anne Temkin first. She's the Marie-José and Henry Kravis Chief Curator of Painting and Sculpture here at MoMA. Jeff Jarvis will come next. Jeff is a journalist, a professor of journalism, and afterwards we'll hear from Maria Popova. She is, I call her the goddess of the web. And last we'll hear from Tor. Tor is the one on the left-hand side, who is a songwriter. So I would like to introduce to you our first speaker, Anne Temkin, and Anne, come onto the stage.